jail. But now, I'm a scientist and I don't like to make data out of anecdotes, so let's look at some data. We talked to 600 drug addicts in 3 cities in Indonesia, and we said, well, so do you know how you get HIV? Oh yeah, by sharing needles. I mean, nearly 100%. Yeah, by sharing needles. And do you know where you can get a clean needle at a price you can afford to avoid that? Oh yeah, 100%. We're smackheads, yes, we know where to get clean needles. So, are you carrying a needle? We're actually interviewing people on the street in the places where they're hanging out and taking drugs. Are you carrying clean needles? 1 in 4, maximum. So no surprises then that the proportion that actually used clean needles every time they injected in the last week, it's just about 1 in 10, and the other 9 in 10 are sharing. So you've got this massive mismatch. Everyone knows that if they share, they're going to get HIV, but they're all sharing anyway. So what's that about? Is it like you get a better high if you share or something? Well, you ask that to a junkie and they're like, are you nuts? I mean, you don't want to share a needle any more than you want to share a toothbrush, even with someone you're sleeping with. There's just a kind of, ick factor there. No, we don't share needles. Well, we share needles because we don't want to go to jail. So in Indonesia at this time, if you were carrying a needle and the cops rounded you up, they could put you into jail. And that changes the equation slightly, doesn't it? Because your choice now is either I use my own needle now or I could share a needle now and get a disease that's going to possibly kill me 10 years from now, or I could use my own needle now and go to jail tomorrow. And while junkies think that it's a really bad idea to expose themselves to HIV, they think it's a much worse idea to spend the next year in jail, where they'll probably end up in Frankie's situation and expose themselves to HIV anyway. So suddenly it becomes perfectly rational to share needles. Now, let's look at it from a policymaker's point of view. This is a really easy problem. For once, your incentives are in line. We've got what's rational for public health. You want people to use clean needles, and junkies want to use clean needles. So we could make this problem go away simply by making clean needles universally available and taking away the fear of arrest. Now, the first person to figure that out and do something about it on a national scale was that well-known bleeding heart liberal, Margaret Thatcher. And she put in the world's first national needle exchange program, and other countries followed suit, Australia, the Netherlands, and a few others. And in all of those countries, you can see not more than 4% ever became infected with HIV of injectors. Now, places that didn't do this, New York City, for example, Moscow, Jakarta, we're talking at its peak of 1 in 2 injectors infected with this fatal disease. Now, Margaret Thatcher didn't do this because she has any great love for junkies. She did it because she ran a country that had a national health service. So if she didn't invest in effective prevention, she was going to have to pick up the costs of treatment later on, and obviously those are much higher. So she was making a politically rational decision. Now, if I take out my public health nerd glasses here and look at these data, it seems like a no-brainer, doesn't it? But in this country, where the government apparently does not feel compelled to provide healthcare for citizens, we've taken a very different approach. So what we've been doing in the United States is reviewing the data, endlessly reviewing the data. So these are reviews of hundreds of studies by all the big muckety-mucks of the scientific pantheon in the United States, and these are the studies that show that needle programs are effective, quite a lot of them. Now, the ones that show that needle programs aren't effective, you think that's one of these annoying dynamic slides and I'm going to press my dongle and the rest of it's going to come up, but no, that's the whole slide. There is nothing on the other side. So, completely irrational, you would think, except that, wait a minute, politicians are rational too, and they're responding to what they think the voters want. So what we see is that voters respond very well to things like this, and not quite so well to things like this. So,